guys, as I've been thinking about what is going to be happening this fall and people coming back to campuses, transportation keeps coming up in that. And it's something that I haven't heard on a lot of these other industry discussions and webinars that I've been a part of. And I think it's high time that we start talking about it, because I can't think of one place outside of a gym or a barbershop or something like that that I think it worries me the most about spreading germs, and that's going to be is going to be on any kind of transit system, be it a subway, be it a bus. But specifically with buses, because in a lot of situations within student housing, we're either a part of a transit system that goes to campus, either provided by the university or by public transit, or there's a lot of communities out there where the property management company is actually going through the process of buying that equipment and hiring the drivers to drive those buses. So that, I think, is going to be a big issue this year, because as we start talking about physical distancing, that means we've either got to go buy more buses and hire more drivers, or there's going to be people that are left behind. So that's why I think this is such an important topic. Guys, give me just a second here to get my notes, because I've had my iPad shut off on me for some reason. Let's go ahead and set the scene a little bit further for this fall. Wood, I've known you for close to 8 years. Your wife works in the student housing industry, which is how you and I actually met. You're super passionate about buses. I remember you telling me the story when we first met that you were driving a high school bus before you were actually driving your own car, I believe. It doesn't matter where I go in this country, when I go to another university and start talking to administration about their transit system, what they're using for transit. If they run their own buses, your name somehow ends up coming up. They either know you, or I just end up referring to what you did at ECU. So it's really kind of amazing. And you've been there at East Carolina for, I think, going on 14 years now. Really quick, just paint a picture for our audience about the plans your department is making for this fall, and what are you hearing from your colleagues at other universities as we get into the details of how we're going to be approaching transportation this year.
Sure. First, thanks for having me on today, and thanks for those kind words. We've been talking about a lot of different things we've never really talked about before when it comes to transportation, even with our changes in the semesters. And a lot of that is still changing. As we talk today, even East Carolina has not made a decision on what our start date for August is going to be. We do know we're going to have 8-week blocks as opposed to semesters, so we've been trying to wrap our heads around what that's going to mean for transportation, but also, the social distancing, physical distancing that will apply to the buses, to the bus stops, all the extra cleaning that's going to be involved, the personal protective equipment that's going to be involved, what new rules are we going to have to follow from administration, from the state level. So a lot of things that are going to be new, a lot of things for us to talk about, a lot of things for me, for my team, to try to wrap our heads around how we address and do it quickly. We were about 2.5 months away from, students being back on campus.
So, Jake, you and I originally met when you were handling business development for another company that was servicing student housing operators, but they exited that space last year. You, however, saw the need and where other providers were not able to service the student housing industry well, and launched your own company. I'm going to ask you to just, plug your company right now and explain how you guys help student housing operators, because not every university has a robust transportation system like ECU, and that's where you can really help out.
Yeah, Wes, thanks for having me. And with athletics first, I had to have my favorite sports team's blanket here in the background. So desperately missing football and hoping it's back this fall. But that is true. There are robust transportation systems provided by universities across the country. I know Woods is one, but there are off-campus housing facilities that prefer a point-to-point service straight from their property to various places on campus that they can customize. And so seeing that and realizing, like you said, a lot of these property managers who have never dealt with transportation before are thrust into this managerial role hat that they put on top of everything else of managing a transportation program. I launched my business last year after being in the business for 15 years and have seen some growth and some interest. And so I really removed that headache and partner with the property to offer that service and comply with federal and state DOT regulations to make sure it's done safely. So it's been great. And like Wood said, we have all of these new things to think about these days. And so wrapping our heads around that has been taking up a lot of time in the last couple of months.
Well, guys, I think by now everyone has heard of the story of a Detroit bus driver, Jason Hargrove, and who lost his life after contracting COVID. I want to really quick talk about keeping people safe, and I've got a kind of a news story from when that happened, just in case people aren't aware of it. So let me play that really quick.
This bus driver wanted to tell the nation something important.
I feel violated.
He posted this video after a female passenger boarded his bus in Detroit and coughed.
For you to get on the bus and stand on the bus and cough several times without covering up your mouth, and you know that we in the middle of a pandemic, that lets me know that some folks don't care.
4 days after he made the video, Jason Hargrove tested positive for coronavirus. He died on April 1st.
It's folks dying from this.
So, guys, employees are a lot like family, and I'm sure, when you go to bed at night, you're thinking about your drivers and folks that are keeping those buses on the road and how to protect them, but also to protect anyone that steps on those buses. What are some best practices that you're putting into place, and what should property managers be planning for if they provide a bus service?
I know for us at ECU, we've already ordered, driver barriers. So there'll be a shield between the operators and the passengers. We're stocking up on personal protective gear, masks. So we're already kind of hearing that's going to be a requirement for employees and for students as we come back in the fall. Reducing capacity on our vehicles. Pre-COVID, it was, if the bus wasn't full, then we weren't being efficient, right? So we're going to go from 60 or 70 people per vehicle at peak time to no more than 28 to 30 people at peak time. So you can imagine what that is going to do to capacity, people's ability to move around. It's somewhere less than half of what we were carrying before. Cleaning is going to be a big deal. Of course, we were doing that before, but there's going to be a big emphasis on doing that daily. We're probably going to do some spot cleaning even throughout the day. For sure, all of our shift changes for our operators will have the supplies that they need to clean their space, sanitize their space as they're going through shift changes. I mean, those are some of the biggest things that we've been thinking about. And I think from a property manager perspective, having that open communication with their partner, whoever their transportation partner is, to make sure that they're thinking along those lines. I think for us, we're talking about how much of this new verbiage would be included in our, contracts or service agreements with our partners, so that, that they can feel like that all of that is going to be taken care of. We're willing to put that in writing. So I think those are things to think about as we approach the fall.
Yeah, and I think that was a great summary. The only things that I'd like to add there is the CDC has done a great job of putting together some guidelines for passenger transportation drivers. And so following those, putting together an SOP that does get included in a contract has gone a long way in easing the conversation with property managers and knowing that we take this real seriously. And I think, Wes, you said it right. Our drivers are like family. Without them, we're nothing. And so keeping them safe is the number one priority, along with the riders. So things like providing a mask, a surgical mask, to any passenger that doesn't get on is something we're looking at, in addition to the plexiglass barrier between the driver and the residents that are getting on. There's also some other interesting things to look at here along what air is being circulated into the bus, and should we really be using air conditioning, or just keep it to just vents that's bringing in outside air? That's something I'm real interested in. And then also ensuring when our drivers check in that they click off within either our app or our timekeeping system that they've cleaned the bus, that they are asymptomatic, so that we know when they show up they're not sick and don't have symptoms, are some of the precautions that we're looking at.
So let's talk about some kind of new products. And, Jake, you mentioned the whole thing about, about, hey, you just turn the AC off, right?
Right.
Several years ago, one of the first houses, or it was the first house that my wife and I purchased, she had a lot of issues with seasonal allergies and that type of thing. And I ended up putting in a, one of these UV lights, because one of the big issues was just mold. And I mean, mold's not always dangerous. But some things, just a little bit of mold can just, you found the right person, and my wife was the right person. It caused a lot of issues. And one of the things that we did was put one of these UV lights into our HVAC system, and that really seemed to help. And I've seen a lot of grocery stores and even schools here in the Charlotte area that are now doing that. Is that an option for buses, and are you guys looking at doing that?
I haven't looked at the UV light specifically. There is some technology that I'm looking at around an EPA disinfectant, EPA approved disinfectant. It's called Aeroclave. In negotiations with a partnership with them, they'll actually retrofit your vehicle with this easy to use system that our drivers would use to disinfect the vehicle. Sounds similar, Wes, but that's kind of what I'm thinking of doing and trying to get done for my buses out there on the road.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
and for us, of course, there's emerging technologies, but we're looking at ways that really we can disinfect our condensers, evaporators. A lot of the transit buses, the air intake is in the back, so we have the ability to let it ingest the disinfectant, so then it covers all of kind of the system where any the air has been pulled past. And for us, we've talked with our partners about what's our fresh air makeup. And for us, as much as we open and close our doors kind of in transit operation, we're getting tons of fresh air makeup in our system. So we looked at, did we need to ride with one of the roof vents kind of cracked open so that it could, pull in fresh air all the time? And we may do that. But we felt pretty good about our percentage of fresh air. And then just adding that, disinfecting the HVAC system to our nightly process.
Gotcha. Well, and I actually wanted to play a quick video from Good Morning America that I saw several weeks ago about a disinfectant that the New York subway system was using that they're claiming can kill it up to 90 days. Of course, they've now gone into I think at the beginning of this month, for the first time ever, started shutting down the subway system, from 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock in the morning, so they can do cleaning. So,
game changer in the race for a vaccine? The promising new development right now in one of the major trials and the potential breakthrough that aims to kill the virus on surfaces. Well, George, now to new developments in that race for a COVID-19 vaccine. Some promising results reported from Oxford University's trial, and there is potentially a breakthrough product to kill the virus on surfaces. Kaylee Hartung has the latest.
This morning, a promising new sign in the fight against COVID-19. Oxford University saying its vaccine appears to protect monkeys from the coronavirus. A handful of vaccines now in human trials. President Trump saying he's hopeful there will be one available in the U.S. by the end of the year. But until then, researchers are investigating new ways to stop the spread of infection.
You kill and you protect.
Dr. Charles Gerba testing a new, potentially game-changing product from Allied Bioscience, claiming after it's sprayed on a surface like this door, it should not only kill COVID-19, but also protect that surface from contamination for 90 days. The New York City transit system experimenting with 3 surface coatings like this.
I'm really interested mostly in schools, in buses, in subways. I think we'll have a lot more confidence we can reduce the spread of these viruses by surfaces with this type of technology.
Regulations make it difficult to use the virus that causes COVID-19 when testing these products. Other viruses act as substitutes. Regulators now reviewing surface coatings claiming to be COVID killers. Experts say the virus is known to spread person to person, cautioning there's still so much unknown about how it's transmitted on surfaces.
So long as we don't have a vaccine, the thought of riding a subway or going to a mall might seem scary to some. But preventative solutions like this could be key to helping protect us all as this country eases its way into reopening. We could see FDA approval as soon as today for one of these surface coatings, Amy.
All right, that is some good news. Kaylee Hartung, thank you.
But I've had that discussion with you guys about that product. Is there anything else new like that you guys are seeing that holds a lot of promise?
I can tell you, I should have paid better attention in chemistry. I think I didn't realize that I was going to need to understand how to read all these labels. And, I know more about cleaning and sanitizing and disinfecting and dwell times and all these things than I ever thought that I would need to know. But at the same time, I think that's very important, right? And I think that's a big piece of this too, is you're going to have to do your research. There's a lot of products. There's a lot of companies that are trying to take advantage of the fact that people are buying products. The dwell time and what kind of product is it? What chemical is it using? Like, all these things are very important. I was on a call this week with somebody, and they were sharing what chemical they were using, and I looked it up, and it had a 10-minute dwell time, and I'm like, I personally would not be as comfortable with, something that had a 10-minute as I would something that was a 2 or a 3-minute. That's kind of been the range that we've been, really wanting to use, is something in that, lower 2 to 3 minute. So I think it's going to be a lot of doing your homework, and I think there's going to continue to be emerging products, right? So you're going to have to stay up to date with all these new products as well.
Yeah, and we know how much drivers care about their bus, and so providing them with equipment to disinfect in between stops as best they can, possibly adding in a few minutes so they can wipe down surfaces. Granted, some of these buses are large, and it would take better part of an hour to properly disinfect, but just to give a wipe down of some of the door handles and some of the tops of the seats and higher touched areas is something that I know my drivers are wanting to do. So that's at least a small gap if we're not going with a larger aeroclave system to disinfect fully and fog the air, that we'll definitely be doing.
And I think another thing for us we've talked about putting hand sanitizing stations on board every vehicle.
Yeah.
Possibly looking to provide even access to wipes that passengers could take, so that they could kind of take that into their own hands if they wanted to clean their space, wipe down spaces, that they would have access to tools to do that as well.
And the other thing is, we want to know how clean people believe this vehicle is. And so looking at and gathering that feedback from our riders is something we're exploring too. Things like surveys and comment cards that we were using for service levels before might actually include more cleanliness style questions and solicit feedback that way.
Yeah. I think you will see that probably transit vehicles, just like airplanes, are going to be cleaner than they have ever been.
Yeah.
The cleanest vehicles that you've ever been on. Is it going to be enough? I think that's yet to be determined.
And Wes, you mentioned, and I'll just throw this in there, the New York City subway, to Wood's point. I had the opportunity, we'll call it, to ride that the other day, and I have never seen it as clean as it was, and no one was on it. And just the level of cleanliness on this subway was unlike anything I've seen before.
Yeah. It's I've got to get on a plane for the first time since March 11th next week. And, a lot of people have asked me if I'm worried. I'm like, I'm more worried about wearing a mask for 5 hours because it's a cross country trip than what I am with, having to, as far as cleanliness is concerned, because I think it is going to be the most clean it's ever been. So, from everything that we've talked about, obviously there's probably going to be more expenses that are happening this year just to operate the same number of buses and have the same number of employees that you had from last year. And from things that, the three of us have talked about prior to today, it's very certain that, be it, public transit systems, be it universities, be it individual properties, buying more buses and hiring more bus drivers just isn't an option. I think, you're probably talking reducing it from 30 to 50% in order to put physical distancing measures in place that everybody can feel comfortable with. That's obviously going to leave a lot of people behind. And I think a lot of people will just choose to drive their own vehicle anyway, if that's an option for them. But for those that aren't, they're truly being left behind. Are you hearing about any creative ways to help those students? I'm thinking of an increase in maybe a bike share program, or maybe some type of ride share app that, matches students with other students based on, when their classes begin and that type of thing. Are there any solutions that you're hearing about as it relates to that?
Well, I am aware of a carpooling app targeted for college students that I've actually heard is picking up some momentum. It's not on every campus yet, but basically if you're a driver that has open seats in your car, you can, for a certain price that you set, list those seats and take fill up your car and go to campus. So that's a pretty neat idea. I think will serve a purpose. The challenge is, while everyone would love to drive their vehicle, parking isn't often in supply on a lot of these campuses. And so I don't know if that's going to be a viable solution everywhere. Yeah. I think you're going to see more walking, more Lime scootering, more biking where possible, to supplement what we're talking about here.
I spent some time in Canada a couple of years ago and working on doing some consulting. Need to make sure I get that right. So in case anybody from the Canadian IRS is listening. Anyway, there was definitely a public transit system that the university, there was a university and a college that were both on that same campus, and it was pretty robust and dropped everybody where they needed to go. But getting to grocery stores and things like that was a little tough. And this property, as well as a lot of places around campus, had the Enterprise Zip card system, and it was pretty easy to constantly find that. I just didn't know if, I've heard some reports of Enterprise really hurting, obviously from a rental car standpoint with, all the business trips being canceled for several months. I just didn't know if maybe rental companies were possibly looking at doing something a little bit more robust with, a zip car type of application. But would anything that you're hearing from that standpoint?
Yeah, I was on a roundtable call earlier this week with a bunch of other universities here in North Carolina, their transportation folks. And, that was a big part of our conversation, was about how it's going to have to be a multi-pronged approach, right? It's not going to be just one thing. It's going to be a mix of a whole bunch of things. We need all these things to kind of take some of that demand off of the buses, so some relaxing of the parking regulations. Maybe we're going to move some folks that were closer to their buildings a little further away so that we can move in some commuters. We may move some of the resident students a little further away so that we would have access for some commuters. And then, the gotcha bikes, the Lime bikes, the scooters, all of those things are going to be very important. Because to Jake's point, the parking is just not available. You can't make more space available, and we're not going to be able to make more space available on the bus either. So it's going to have to be a mix of a bunch of different things that help kind of ease some of that demand. And I think going to those 8-week blocks will help some too. So we won't have quite as many students on campus at the same time. And we talked a lot about having to spread those peaks, and from a scheduling perspective, that was one of the things that we shared. The most help would be kind of making sure that we spread those peaks out a little bit, so we're not having to deal with high volume throughout the day.
Gotcha. Well, guys, I appreciate it. We've gone 10 minutes, well, really 25 minutes over what we needed to for the panels. And so I appreciate you guys being patient with getting on, and then also just spending the extra time. I feel like this is probably not going to be the last conversation that we're going to have as it relates to transit and getting ready for this fall. So I got a feeling I'll be calling out to you guys again to see if we can have some further discussion on it. Jake, how can folks get in touch with you if they've got any, maybe it's just consulting services on how to approach, the situation with COVID and making their own services more safe, or maybe it's actually hiring you for your services and providing that for them. How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I can be found on LinkedIn, Jake Murphy, or email jm@jmtransportationsolutions.com. I'm happy to send out Wes my contact info. Maybe it can go out with your email blast, whatever is best. Yeah. But I'm a pretty easy to find guy, very available. Like Wood, I can tell I live and breathe transportation and love to have conversations about it, just to learn more about your unique situation. So I'd love reach outs, just questions, even if we don't discuss contract opportunities. So that's the way you can get me.
All right, great. And Wood, I know a lot of folks probably have questions for you, but I know you're not necessarily a service for hire by being an employee with ECU. But if they've got any specific questions, we'll link your email. I'll follow up with you later, make sure that that's okay. But we'll link your email in our show notes. So if anybody has a question for Wood, he can respond to you when he's got time, because he is going to be a busy guy for the next several months for sure. Guys, I appreciate it so much. Thanks again.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Wes.